Bienvenidos and welcome to the A-Level Spanish Induction. Hopefully this will give you an idea of how the course works and what to expect of A-Level Spanish at Samuel Whitbread Academy. Firstly, let's get the assessment out of the way. We use the AQA Spanish A-Level specification, so the course is assessed with 3 separate exams. Paper 1 is a 2.5-hour exam that assesses your listening, reading and writing skills. It focuses on the topics we will study with specific emphasis on the Hispanic world. The texts and recordings used will all be taken from authentic sources. The difference in listening from GCSE is that you have control of the recording, so you can pause and replay sections as many times as you need. You'll be assessed with a range of questions such as gap fills, translations, true and false, and written question and answers, including 2 questions where you are asked to summarise what you've heard and read to demonstrate that you're able to manipulate the language accurately. So that's the biggest exam you will do, as it's worth 50% of your final grade. Paper 2 is a 2-hour exam to assess your writing skills. We will study a book and a film during the course, and you'll be asked to write a short essay, only around 300 words for each of them. You could be asked questions regarding the portrayal of characters or themes, or even the historical context. You'll have an hour for each of your essays, and the exam will be worth 20% of your final grade. The final exam is worth 30%, and it's a 21 to 23 minute speaking exam. This does include a 5-minute preparation period, so you will only be speaking for a maximum of 18 minutes. The first part of the exam is a discussion about a stimulus card. You'll be given a card with some pictures and information from one of the topics we will study and 3 questions. This is where you'll have your 5 minutes to prepare what you're going to say. The purpose of this is to show that you've understood the sub-theme of the card and that you're aware of different views and opinions regarding the issues present in the Hispanic world during the 5 to 6 minute discussion. The other part of the exam is quite exciting. Throughout the duration of the course, you will undertake an individual research project and an issue that interests you most in the Hispanic world. In the speaking exam, you will then present your findings in a short 2-minute presentation, followed by a 10-minute discussion with the examiner about your research. Now, it is important to mention that all 3 exams allow a large portion of the marks for the accuracy and application of grammar. In all 3 exams, they class incorrect use of tenses or pronouns or idiomatic phrases as a serious error, which means if you make any of these mistakes, you won't be eligible for marks in the top 2 bands. So in order to combat this early, the first month of the course here at Samuel Whitbread will be dedicated to intensive grammar revision. Now, with that out of the way, we can talk about what you're actually going to study. Each topic is split into 3 sub-themes. So we have Unit 1, Traditional and Modern Values, which is divided into changes in the family, such as how nowadays there are more single-parent families or blended families, attitudes towards marriage and divorce, and the influence of the Catholic Church. Now, most Hispanic countries are predominantly Catholic, so we look at the way this affects the values. Unit 2 is cyberspace, which is split into the influence of the internet, the benefits and dangers of social media, and the role of smartphones in society. Unit 3 looks at equality of the sexes. So that includes the role of women in the world of work, male chauvinism and feminism, and LGBT rights. We then move on to look at the topic of immigration, including the advantages and disadvantages, immigration in the Hispanic world, and the problems that those who are undocumented might face. Then this follows on nicely to the topic of racism, where we look at racist and xenophobic attitudes, measures that have been taken or are being taken against racism, and anti-racist legislation in the Hispanic world. Following this comes the topic of integration, where we look at the integration of cultures, education, and religions. One of my personal favourites is the topic, the influence of idols, where we look at singers and musicians, TV and cinema stars, models, and more to evaluate whether they are a good or bad influence for young people to follow. Unit 8 focuses on the regional identity in Spain, where we can look at traditions and customs such as bullfighting and festivals, We also look at the food and the languages. On a wider scale, we then look at the cultural heritage of the Hispanic world, like tourist sites and pre-Hispanic civilizations such as Machu Picchu and the Inca civilizations in Peru. We look at art and architecture and musical heritage. Then the next few topics are a bit more political. Unit 10 is the youth of today, citizens of tomorrow, which considers young people's attitudes towards politics, unemployment amongst young people, and their ideal society. We look at the monarchies and dictatorships in the Hispanic world, of which there are many, but we start with Spain and Franco's dictatorship from 1939 until 1975. Then we look at the evolution of the Spanish monarchy before widening the scope to look at Latin American dictators. Then finally, we look at popular movements in which we analyse the effectiveness of protests and strikes, the power of syndicates, and examples of social protests. So those are all of the cultural topics that we study. But as I mentioned earlier, alongside that, we also study a book and a film. At Samuel Whitbread, the book that we study is a play by Federico García Lorca called La Casa de Bernarda Alba. It follows a family of women following the death of their patriarch in 1936. So one of the key themes that we look at is the role of women pre-Civil War. Whereas the film we study is Guillermo del Toro's El laberinto del fauno, or in English, Pan's Labyrinth, which takes place directly after the Civil War, but combines the real world with the fantasy world of the protagonist, a little girl called Ophelia. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about is the individual research project. This is where you can develop your interest on any issue from the Hispanic world, such as Day of the Dead, a Hispanic artist whose work you'd like to explore further, LGBT rights in a particular Hispanic country, an element of culture or a place like Machu Picchu. You could study a different film or a different piece of literature than the one that we are studying that interests you, a festival or a custom that you feel you could research, a historical event that interests you. You could look into a dance or a genre of music, or if there's a Hispanic figure like the king that you think is interesting, you could base your research around them. So that is the AQA A-Level Spanish course at Samuel Whitbread. If you are joining us in September, there are a few things you can do to prepare. I will be sending out a grammar revision booklet to be completed that covers all of the tenses that should have been covered for GCSE to prepare you for that intensive month of grammar when you arrive. This is the most important task, but then there are additional, slightly more fun tasks you can do to keep yourself engaged in Hispanic culture. You could watch Spanish films or TV or listen to Spanish music. You can keep up to date with news from Spanish-speaking countries as well. Anyway, that is enough from me. Have a great summer, stay safe and healthy, and I will hopefully see you in September.